Ag Week Weather is sponsored by Bremer Bank. Connect with a banker today at bremer.com.
What does the weather have in store for us for the month of November? Here's John with our Agri-weather outlook.
For the first time, this two-week forecast falls entirely within the month of November, and it's still nationwide, even into southern Canada, mostly behaving more like late fall and not as much like early winter. There will be, again, a couple of opportunities for getting some rejuvenating moisture systems, some rain into the Great Plains before we get the ground frozen up, and some of the western part of the Midwest will tap into some of that as well. The snows may be significant, but most of them will be in the mountain ranges. There may be a little wet snow out into the plains, but it doesn't look like that will amount to very much. Now, the jet stream at first glance looks a little scary, as we are seeing quite a bit of troughiness in the jet stream and some cold weather, some freezing weather as we start this weekend. But that's kind of going to basically retreat due to some ridging coming here into the western part of Canada that will basically weaken that cold air connection and turn what is cold into just basically cool weather, meaning a lot of 40s and maybe even a few days in the 50s into the northern plains, 50s and maybe a day or two around the 60s in through the Middle West. Kind of cool, but seasonally so this week. Nothing unusually cold. One thing we are seeing is the relatively warm weather pattern across the deep south will go into more modified average, really. We're going to see a lot of days that are kind of cool in the southeastern states. Florida and Texas will remain fairly warm with a number of days in the 70s and 80s, and South Florida, South Texas will still have some hot weather. There is a little area of low pressure that looks like it's going to cut itself off in the southwest. Fairly weak circulation. Don't think that'll bring a bunch of big-time rains to the desert or anything like that. And eventually a wave will likely come along, pick that up, and send it out as a little bit of a disturbance, which again I think will keep the weather relatively rainy over the Great Plains. Not necessarily expecting widespread heavy rains, just thinking we'll get some opportunities to get some rainfall. And we're still seeing that jet stream trying to go pretty far north. We'll keep the Rocky Mountain areas quite cold. That's where the snow is going to be. But across the Midwest and the Great Lakes, nothing worse than cool temperatures, which is obviously fairly typical as we get on in through November. For the precipitation pattern, it does look fairly rainy in the western Great Lakes, the western Corn Belt, and a lot of the Great Plains. Not necessarily super heavy rain, but opportunities here for some much needed rainfall in the plain states, which has been stuck in drought weather for much of the fall. I do anticipate some Pacific Northwest precipitation. That'll be snow in the higher elevations, not west in the deserts, and not much along the eastern seaboard. And the second week into middle November, still looking fairly rainy across the Great Lakes down through the Central Plains.